everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is finally the day I'm going to share with you the birth story of my daughter Maisie. She's here, she's chilling on my lap. She's a bit fussy because she's having bad colic, so occasionally I might have to interrupt to soothe her a little bit, but hopefully she'll let me get through this. It took me a little bit to come here and share with you the story. I mentioned on my Nest With Me vlogs, the last one, the 39-week one, I mentioned that then she was born after the last clip, and I shared a picture of her and the name, and I shared on Instagram as well, back when she was born and all of that. In there, I think on Instagram, I mentioned at some point that I wanted to come here and share an actual birth story. I think the lens of my camera is all dirty. So like I was saying, I mentioned on Instagram I wanted to share her birth story, but her birth story, like her birth, was not ideal, and it left me a little bit traumatized, to say the least. So I feel like I needed to take my time to process my emotions. I didn't want to come here and cry, because ultimately her birth story is a happy story because it brought me to her, or it brought her to me, however you want to see that. So that's gonna be a sad story, so I didn't want to tell the story in a hurtful way or portraying the wrong emotion, if that makes any sense. So I wanted time to, like I said, process my emotions. Now, it's been nearly 2 months, I can't believe it. And I'm happy that when she was born, I made some notes on my phone as things were going along, because I knew I would want to share this with you, and I wanted to remember the details on how it progressed. Because the truth is, her labor was an induction, and I mentioned that several times, at least on the 39-week vlog that I shared, but maybe also on the 38th or even others, that I didn't want to get an induction. And that's the theme of this story, was that my birth plan, even though my birth plan and my birth mentality has always been, I'll follow whatever doctor's advices and I'll do what the doctors tell me I should do, and you know, they know better, they studied medicine, I didn't. But obviously you have some ideal scenarios that you wanted. So ultimately my thing was, I wanted to get an epidural straight away and I wanted to survive. Technically I did both, but then obviously on my birth plan I had a few things, just minor details that I was happy to let go. I just didn't expect to have to let go of so much of it. So I'll let you know the rough draft of what things I had to let go. So I didn't want an induction, I got an induction. I didn't want my waters to be broken for me, I got my waters broken by the doctor. I didn't want to use any tools like the suction cup or the pads. She was born with a suction cup. What else? I wanted epidural. I got one, but it didn't work. So basically I had a labor without an epidural. But here we are, it is what it is. At the end of the day, I followed the doctor's advice, and that brings me to my 39 plus 2 appointment. So it was my 39-week appointment. I was at 39 plus 2. That's the last clip that I shared with you on that vlog. The previous day, actually, on 39 plus 1, I wasn't feeling the baby move as much. And the advice is always, if you feel like the movements are reduced, you need to go get checked out. Bear in mind, it's not like I have ever felt her stop moving. It's that she has always been, during the whole pregnancy, until that day, a very, very active baby. She would be moving all the time, so much so that I never even did those kick counters that people do as a recommendation, because she honestly was moving every day, the whole day, every night, the whole night. At 39 plus 1, I felt like she was still moving, but way less. So I went to the emergency room, I did a CTG, and she was moving, she was fine, but again, she wasn't moving as much. They give you this machine where you're supposed to press every time you feel the baby move, and I didn't press that many times because I wasn't really feeling her. But they checked, they did a scan, everything was good. I came back home. That is part of that vlog. The following day, 39 plus 2, I went to get my normal appointment with my actual doctor, my OBGYN. OBGYN. Why is it so hard to say these letters? Anyway, I went for my regular appointment with her. She did another CTG, did the scan as well. Baby was fine, I was fine, placenta was fine, everything was fine, but the baby wasn't moving as much. And again, she tested that with both the amount of times that I pressed the button or that I didn't press the button. And when she did the scan, she also saw that the baby was very quiet. Her recommendation at that point was to induce labor, and she said it was up to me. It was not medically needed at that moment. I could go without. It was not like, yes, you need to be induced straight away. But what she said, things into perspective for us, which was, baby's fine right now, but I'm not gonna guarantee that baby's gonna be fine in 5, 6, 10, 24 hours. Like, things change rapidly, your baby is not moving a lot, and you are 39 plus 2, so baby is more than ready to come out. Josh and I had a few minutes to ponder and to decide. I called my mom, my parents were at home with TJ, and ultimately we decided to follow her advice and go for an induction. So that was the first failing at my birth plan, was that I really didn't want to be induced, because I've always had the perspective baby will come when baby's ready. Babies are born on their birthday. We just don't know when that is. So then we agreed to that. We went to get checked in into the labor ward and all of that. So my first note was that at 4 p.m. I was told to be induced. At 4:56 p.m., so less than an hour later, I was already in a room with the gown on. That was that last clip that I recorded where I was giving you an update when Josh went back home to grab the hospital bag. Yes, I know, we could have had it in the car. Every time we went to the emergency room, we had the bag with us, but that day we were just going for an appointment, so we didn't take the bag. So Josh came back home to grab it. At 6:45 p.m., that's when the induction started. Mine was done through the form of a pill, like an oral pill. They told me the name of the medicine that was in it. It was a very long word. I cannot remember, but it was like the tiniest pill I've ever taken in my life, that I looked at it and I was like, seriously, is this what's gonna make baby come? So they gave me that, I took it, and I was told that in a few hours they were gonna come back and check on me, see if I was already starting to be dilated or anything, because on the appointment the doctor did check me and she said, it's not low, you are not dilated at all, like nothing is happening. So that was the first step. So I was told a few hours later someone was gonna come and check on me, see what was going on and what progression we were getting, or if we needed to take more pills or do some IV stuff or something. And then from then on, so this was at 6:45 when I took those pills, and I wish I had taken more detailed notes in between these times. I don't know why I didn't. I was trying to take notes, but at the same time I don't know, I was very overwhelmed, I was scared, I was already feeling the mum guilt for getting an induction, but let's move past that detail. So I started having contractions super quickly. I reminded my doctor, I gave them my birth plan, I reminded them that I wanted an epidural straight away, and I was told that as soon as I started having contractions they would come and give me an epidural. Of course, when that happened, which was super fast, they weren't expecting it to happen for a few hours, but then I started feeling like these very strong period cramps. They weren't contractions for sure, because contractions are like a wave, they come and go, and this was just a permanent pain. To be honest, I thought I needed to go to the toilet, so I did go to the toilet a few times and sat there and tried to do something. Nothing happened. I called the doctor to come check on me. The doctor told me these are contractions, and I was like, are they? They don't feel like contractions. The machine that was monitoring my belly was not indicating that I was having contractions. But the doctor was like, no, this is probably the beginning of it. Contractions with an induction sometimes are different, especially given that it's your second baby. So because they weren't yet full-on contractions, she couldn't give me the epidural or request the epidural. So she prescribed me with IV paracetamol just to numb the pain a little bit. But then like 10 minutes after that or so, 10-15 minutes, full-on contractions started coming. The machine that was measuring the waves were huge. Contractions are measured in a scale of Togo. I don't know if that's how you read it or if it's TOGO, but they go from 0 to 100, 100 being the strongest. My contractions, like the movements my uterus was having, they were like 10, 15 Togo. And at that point, after the doctor came checking me in, blah blah blah, they were at like 80 something. It was straight away, it was super fast. Anyway, then I was sure they were contractions, they were waves, they would get worse before they got better, just like most things in life. I pressed the call bell and I asked the nurse, can I please have my epidural? Guess what? The anesthesiologist was on an emergency C-section, so I had to wait. I have the feeling that when it was with TJ, the anesthesiologist was also on an emergency section, so I also had to wait. Anyway, they eventually came, and I have written here that I took the epidural at 9:30 p.m. So induction, let's call it 6:30 just for round up of the math. 3 hours later, I was already full on labor, like 3 hours, like crazy contractions. By the time the epidural came, they were already on 100. Most of the contractions would hit 100. If they weren't at 100, they were at 90 something, but most of them 100. They were super strong. They came, they gave me an epidural, and obviously I cannot describe to you what they were doing because it happens on your back. It did feel similar, yet very different from the one I received in the UK. One difference that I noticed was that, first of all, this one didn't hurt. Like, they give you a little numbing thing. Obviously, that hurts, that little injection. But then in the UK, when they connected the liquid, the actual epidural liquid, it feels like electric shock waves going up and down your spine. In here, I didn't feel anything. Later on, when the epidural didn't do anything, I started to feel that maybe it wasn't in the correct place or something. I don't know, because in the UK, I did feel the shock wave for like a few seconds. In here, absolutely nothing. Also here, the anesthesiologist told me that epidural is like individual doses. So he put one in and he was going to start to slowly kick in, so the contractions would get softer and softer and softer until eventually I stopped feeling them. But eventually, a few hours later, they would start coming back up. And when that happened, then I needed to press the call bell, call the nurse, and ask for the second dose of epidural, which, different from the UK. In the UK, it's just a machine that regularly dispenses the next dose, and you also have a button that if you want it sooner you can press, and it's not like you can press the button all the time but every now and then the button becomes free for you to press if you want, if that makes sense. Anyway, so he left. He told me about half an hour for the epidural to kick in, same as in the UK. The difference was it never worked. Like, the contractions got slightly softer, but I could still feel every single one of them. They were still painful. It's not like they were just pressure, because I was told, oh, you could feel some pressure, but it's not going to be painful. No, they were painful, just a little bit less painful. But even that lasted maybe 15 minutes until they were full on 100 again. At 10 p.m., so half an hour after my epidural, my doctor came in and she checked me and she said, I think we should break your waters, because precisely the epidural wasn't really doing anything. And she was like, if you break your waters, let's just kick on the process. It's gonna make it go faster and we're just gonna move this right along. I was like, okay, fine, if you think that's necessary. She broke them. It was a very weird feeling. If you ever got your waters broke, you know what I'm talking about. So that was at 10 p.m, half an hour after I got the epidural. I was told then that things were gonna start progressing faster and the epidural was gonna work meanwhile, but they were also gonna bring the second dose of epidural, and I was told to try and relax and just wait for things. I remember I had a Calippo ice cream. I was told I couldn't really eat anything. I could drink water, I could drink juice, I think, and I could eat Calippo random. But I was like, okay, sure, I'll have a Calippo. So I remember being sat there on the bed eating the Calippo, and by the time I finished it, how long did it take me to eat the Calippo? I have no idea, but those minutes that it took, by the time I finished, oh my god, the pain. I remember being laying in bed, like I finished the ice cream, I gave the thing to Josh to put in the bin, and then I laid back, and 5-10 minutes later, Josh was playing on his console, just, you know, waiting for things to progress. And I just remember, like, shouting his name, like, Josh, come here, come here. He came next to the bed and he was like, what's going on? And I was like, oh my god, the pain is so intense. And according to my notes, that was at 11 p.m. So 1 hour after the doctor broke my waters. 1 hour. The pain was so ridiculously intense. With TJ, I had an epidural that worked for about 4 or 5 hours and then stopped working. And then I got more manual top-ups that, well, I think one of them worked, but then the other ones didn't, and then it stopped working again. Anyway, point being, with TJ, I also felt all the contractions up until the end. I didn't feel anything down there, but I felt all the contractions. In here, though, these contractions, so much worse. They were so painful. My body started shaking so violently. It seemed like I was having convulsions on the bed. I could barely talk. A mixture of I was in so much pain with the contractions were so quick at that point, like they were every 1 minute or even less. But also I was shaking so much that my jaw was trembling so much I could barely get a word out. I was squeezing Josh's hand. I was like, this is horrible. Like, I've never felt anything like this. I feel like I'm dying. What is happening? Where's the epidural? Josh kept pressing the call bell that later on we discovered that once you press it until they come and press it off, even if you press more times, it doesn't do anything outside the room. So we were pressing the call bell desperately, thinking it was like beeping like crazy outside. No, it beeped once, and then every other press that we've done, that did nothing for me. Anyway, the nurse eventually walks in. Took forever, at least in my mind it took forever, and she was like, hey, what can I do for you? And there I am, shaking violently on the bed in the most amount of pain that I've ever felt in my life. And I was like, what do you think you can do for me? I was begging for the second dose of epidural. They were like, oh, it's coming, hold on, hold on. I had to ask her to check me down there because in addition to the pain, I was feeling so much pressure down there. Like, it wasn't the need to push. I've always heard it being described as you feel like you need to push. And bear in mind, my epidural completely dead, so I was going at it without any pain meds. I was feeling what is supposed to be felt if you don't have any medication. And I've always heard people describing it as you feel like a need to push or a need to poop. I wouldn't describe it as that. It was a lot of pressure, but did I want to push? No, because everything hurt so much that I was terrified of pushing. But I had to beg the nurse to check me. She kept saying like, no point in checking. It's only been like an hour since your water got broken. It wouldn't have progressed this fast. I was like, please check, please check. I could barely speak. Remember that? So I was like speaking with 2 words at a time in between contractions. I was like, please, please, squeezing Josh's hand. The nurse was just not checking me. I was like, what is going on? Eventually she did check me. She lifted my gown. She kept like covering me with the bed sheets, and I kept like kicking the bed sheets out of my legs. I remember that. It felt like I was throwing a tantrum, but I couldn't really talk. So I wanted to express to her that I needed to be checked because there was so much pressure. I was like, oh my god, the head is gonna be right there. Eventually she checked me and she's like, oh no, like I said, it's hours away. The head is still too far up there. You're not fully dilated yet. And I was like, oh my god, where's the second epidural? At that point, someone came and gave me the second epidural. I couldn't talk. I couldn't open my eyes at that point. When I say this was the most pain I've ever felt, like I totally agree when people describe that birth, labor and delivery like the most pain someone can feel, because I feel like my brain already protected me from that part and I don't really remember exactly how it felt anymore. I just remember how I thought it felt. At that point, someone came in. I have the feeling that there was a lot of people in the room at that point, but like I said, I had my eyes closed shut because I was in so much pain, so I don't really know who was in there. But someone came and I remember someone holding my hand and telling me, it's gonna get better now, we're gonna give you the second epidural. And I was like shaking and whatever, and I remember that person like squeezing something into my IV and telling me, do you feel the cold liquid going through? And I did feel the cold liquid going through somewhere in my body. I don't remember where anymore, maybe the back. And I was just like, yeah, but again, barely speaking. She was like, that's the epidural, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get better, keep breathing through the contractions. I feel like I completely lost my control over my body. I was crying. I don't think I was screaming or anything. I'm sure I was making noises, but I don't think I was like screaming in pain. But I felt like I didn't have the control over my body. With TJ's labor, I was very proud of myself because even though I was in a lot of pain, I was still focusing on breathing and I was breathing correctly, and people told me several times, different midwives, oh, you're doing so well, you're breathing very well, well done. This time around, I was in so much pain that I couldn't think. My brain had switched off at some point and I wasn't thinking about anything. I felt like I was in pure survival mode. So I was crying, I had my eyes shut, I was shaken, I wasn't breathing correctly, I'm sure. All sorts of things going on. And then, out of nowhere, my doctor walks in the room with a few more people and they unlock my bed, those hospital beds on wheels, they unlock it and they start wheeling it out of the bedroom. And I was so confused because I was convinced that that room where I was when baby was going to be born. I didn't realize that in Portugal, you don't have the baby on the same room. You go to the actual like labor ward delivery thing to give birth. I had no idea. In the UK, you give birth in the same room. They just come and like kind of transform the room a little bit and transform the bed a little bit, but you don't move. You stay in the same room, you stay in the same bed, and everything just happens there. Apparently not in Portugal. So I didn't know that, and I was very, very confused. So when they start wheeling the beds out of the room, again, I couldn't talk. Josh was very confused. No one was talking English to him, even though they all knew he didn't speak Portuguese. And previously, they all had spoken English to him. It was surreal. At that moment, I think with all the stress or everything, people kept speaking Portuguese to him. And I was way too over my head to be able to translate things to him. So Josh was very confused as well. And it just felt like a huge mess. But so they started wheeling me out of the room and then they stopped almost at the door. And they wanted Josh to pick up the baby's clothes. So Josh went to the bag and he picked up the clothes, and then they wanted me to check if the clothes he picked up were okay, and there I was convulsing in bed with my eyes shut saying, I don't care, any clothes is fine, I don't care. And they kept saying like, open your eyes and check, open your eyes and check, and I was like, I don't care, anything, let him choose anything, he's not an idiot, like I don't care. And it was like, oh, but moms are always very particular with the baby's first clothes. And I was like, I don't care, I've never been in so much pain in my life, I do not care. I said so many times, I don't care. They made me open my eyes and look at the clothes before they did anything else. So I opened my eyes, I don't even think I saw what he had in his hands. I just looked around the room, I saw him, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. And I closed my eyes again. And then the doctor came in, and the doctor was like, why is it taking so long? Let's go. Up until this moment, I still didn't know what was happening. The doctor comes in, and she goes like, what is going on? We need to go, let's go. And they were telling the doctor, oh, she hasn't really checked the baby clothes. We don't have the baby clothes. And I think I looked at my doctor with like a pleading look, like, what the hell is going on? Please help me. And then the doctor was like, that's not a priority right now, let's just go. So we went. They started wheeling the bed through the hallway, a bunch of curves and like double doors and a bunch of people around me. I lost sight of Josh, and at some point I managed to ask between contractions, am I having a C-section? Because in my head that was the only thing that made sense. Why were they taking me out of their room only if I was having a C-section, right? And one of the nurses looks at me and goes like, no, of course not, why would you be having a C-section? But I was not in a capacity of continuing that conversation. So they wheeled me, they took me onto this room, which apparently is the delivery room ward, I don't even know what you call it in English. And then they wanted me to change beds. They put my bed next to this other bed and they were like, go to that bed. And I was like, what the hell? I was having super strong contractions. I remember looking at the bed and then like a contraction would come and I would just freeze, and they'd be like, go and move on to the other bed, and I would look at it and I would try to figure out how to do it, and another contraction would come and I would freeze again. And eventually I managed to ask them, how do I do it? Like, do I stand up? Like, do I get out of this bed? And they were like, no, just drag yourself over. And another contraction would come and I would freeze. And in my head, that took a long time of me just looking at it and be like, are they kidding me? Is this a joke? How do they want me to move beds? I feel like if you've been through labor and delivery, you're probably thinking that I am being too dramatic. Like I said, I was over my head with pain. I had never felt anything like that. They told me to use my elbows. Eventually I managed to do it. Do I remember doing it? Not really. And then they wanted to change my gown for one that was exactly the same. I don't know why I needed to get changed because my gown wasn't dirty at that point. But I had to change my gown. I think the second one was exactly the same. Whatever. I managed to do it, and then like Josh wasn't in the room. That's the surreal part. And then someone just goes like, you can start pushing. I was so confused with what was happening because they were all still like putting gowns on and gloves and opening those like sterile parts of instruments, and someone, I don't even know who, someone was telling me start pushing. And I was very confused because in the UK they tell you how to push and like they count with you and they explain the whole contraction thing, but that like at that moment I wasn't having a contraction because I was talking to them. So I remember asking the person who said it, was a guy, was like, how do I push? Because I wasn't having a contraction right then. And he was like, you had the baby already, you know how to push, just do it again, just push. And I was very confused because I was waiting for a contraction to push because that's what I did the first time around, and they were like, just do it. And in the UK they counted you, and I was supposed to push like 3 times per contraction, and in here they wanted like single long pushes, so that was a complete different pushing experience from last time. And in addition I was in so much pain. Eventually my doctor turns around, because up until that moment she was there getting ready, and then she looks at me violently shaking in bed, and she goes like, why is she in so much pain? Has she not gotten the epidural? Now I told her I'm in so much pain because I needed her to know that, like, I think it was probably very obvious by looking at me, but I just kept saying it hurt so much, it hurt so much, it hurt so much. And she asked the team, has she not got her second dose of epidural? And then someone told her that I had gotten it, but like 5 minutes ago, so obviously it hadn't kicked in. And the doctor got really frustrated because obviously that's not gonna kick in time now. So she apologized and she said, I cannot do anything regarding your contractions, you're gonna have to feel them. I'm gonna give you a local anesthetic down there if that's okay. At some point I must have said yes or please or something, because she did do it literally with a syringe and a few shots down there. The most surreal thing, honestly. And at least I didn't feel anything down there. And then people kept telling me to push, but Josh wasn't in the room. So I was trying to, in between contractions, ask them, where's my husband? And eventually they realized that he wasn't there yet, and they kept telling me, oh, we'll come in a minute, he's gonna be the last one to arrive in the room. And then the doctor told someone to go get my husband because this baby is gonna be born right now. And I cannot reiterate how confusing the whole experience was. I felt like I was out of control. I felt like the whole thing was out of control. I had no idea what was going on. I didn't feel in control of anything, in charge of anything. My birth plan had gone through the roof at that point. Not that it matters, because what matters is that the baby's okay and that I'm okay. But I felt so confused with TJ's birth. I knew exactly what was going on. Like, I knew how many centimeters I was dilated. I knew how long roughly things were gonna take until the next stage. I knew what each person was doing. I knew what was happening to my body, and I knew what was gonna happen next. In here, no idea about anything. Eventually Josh walks in the room with the gown on and one of those hats and a mask. And again, I was very confused. I was like, why is he like this? This is so weird. And they kept telling me to push. At that point, Josh was right there, so he was holding my hand and I was trying to push. And I was trying to do it like I did last time, like multiple short pushes. I kept being told off to not do it like that and to hold my breath and do a long push. But I couldn't because I was in so much pain, so I would try and push, and then my body would just like kind of collapse on itself. And that's where like the whole trauma thing was. And I said I didn't want to cry. But I feel like that's where the whole traumatizing experience came. If this wasn't traumatizing up until now, the confusion or whatever, but the fact that I felt like I was failing the baby, my baby, because I couldn't push the way I was supposed to push, and that I was letting the pain take the best over me, and I didn't want the pain to be in control. I wanted me to be in control, but I couldn't. So the pain was winning over myself. And the whole time I just kept thinking that I was failing the baby because I should be the one winning, not the pain. Anyway, then the doctor asked me if she could use a suction cup. Again, it was on my birth plan not to, and she knew that. So I told her no. And she was like, okay, but I think it would be best. But if you don't want to, then okay, let's keep going, let's keep pushing. And I was trying to push. My body was not collaborating. Eventually she was like, please let me use the suction cup. You are in too much pain. You're not gonna be able to push anything good. Let me use the suction cup. She was literally trying to convince me, let me use the suction cup and the baby's gonna be here in the next few seconds and your pain is gonna stop straight away. And I think that's when she said straight away, that's when she convinced me. And I just remember looking at Josh and gripping his hand and gripping my teeth and just going like, okay, fine, just use it. And I was so scared. I remember as well, before saying yes, asking them, are you sure it's okay? Are you sure it's okay? And I just kept asking them, are you sure it's okay? Because you always hear all these horror stories of babies being born with instruments and getting like brain damage or like neck damage or any sort of damage. And I would never be able to forgive myself if something happened to her because they had to use instruments, because I wasn't able to deal with the pain, because pain is just pain at the end of the day, so you should be able to move forward with that. Anyway, I said yes to the suction cup, put it in, and she told me just do a little push, doesn't need to be strong, just literally one little push and the baby's gonna be born. And that's what happened, and the baby was born at 11:25 p.m, which was literally 1.5 hours after my waters had been broke. The whole thing, since I took those pills for induction, between 4.5 and 5 hours, the whole shebang, the whole hell breaking loose. The time between me being wheeled to that weird room and her being born, and we know this because Josh took a picture of himself in the hallway getting ready and then the first picture of her. It was 11 minutes between those two pictures. In my head, it felt like I was there trying to push for ages. I would have never guessed that I was pushing for way less than 10 minutes. It was chaotic. It was very fast. It was very intense. It was chaotic. It was traumatizing. And at the end, like, they sewed me up, like there was some tears. I got some stitches. I have nothing to blame on the doctor. My doctor was amazing. And if I was to have another baby, I'd go with her again. Like, she was very good, very professional, but also very calm and funny, but also very active. How can you be calm and active at the same time? I have no idea, but that's how she portrays to me. So I really like that doctor. But yeah, I was in there for a bit. Eventually I asked her, once I was able to talk, the pain did go away straight away. She was right about that. The second the baby came out, the pain immediately came away. The placenta was delivered at some point again in the UK. I knew exactly what was happening. I was told to push the placenta out. I got some injections for it. And in there, no idea. The placenta, I was just told the placenta was out. And I was like, what the hell? I didn't feel anything. Like, how is the placenta out? I didn't see the placenta this time around. That was on my birth plan. I wanted to see the placenta, but they didn't show it to me. I guess it's not a thing here, I don't know. They didn't even ask, they just took it away. And yeah, the whole thing was very weird. Eventually I managed to ask her, why am I shaking so much? And she said it was my body reacting to the enormous amount of pain I was under by discharging adrenaline. So I was having a super long adrenaline discharge rush through, like, I don't know, my body was crazy running on adrenaline. Eventually I stopped shaking. Took a while, I don't know exactly how long, but it did take a while for me to stop shaking. And then I was taken to the recovery ward. And another thing that I found really weird was that whole time we were taken from the delivery ward to the recovery ward, I guess, which was like a shared room with curtains around you. There was no crib for the baby. And yes, I know you're supposed to do skin to skin, and I did it and Josh did it, but then we were there for hours and we had nowhere to put the baby. And I was like, okay, I guess we'll hold the baby, but at the same time, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that, because obviously you want to hold your baby as much as possible, but at the same time, I was exhausted. I also wanted to put the baby down. Josh had her for a while, and then like they brought me some food, which was the most disappointing food. So like by the time we were in the recovery ward, it was like 1 a.m. and instead of bringing me like a little snack, they literally brought me soup at 1 in the morning. I looked at them, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, soup? I haven't eaten anything for hours. Why soup? Why couldn't it be like toast? Literally, something as easy as that, soup. Anyway, I didn't eat the soup, if you must know. Like, I looked at it and I was like, I don't have it in me to eat soup right now. And I just kept focusing on all the amazing snacks that I had waiting for me in the bedroom. Then they were told Josh to leave me and to go move our things from the room we were originally to the new room in the new section of the hospital. There was so much moving rooms. It's insane. Why can he not just stay on the same room? That's my birth story. That's how she came into the world. She was bigger than TJ. She was 1 day longer in the pregnancy, and she was born on that same day. I was fully convinced she was gonna be born the following day after midnight, but somehow at 11:25 she was born. So yeah, even though this was a very different story from TJ's, and if you wanna check his birth story, I'm gonna leave it linked down there. For you to go check all the details. But labor and delivery this time around, I do not wish this on anyone. Yes, it was nice because it was short, but oh my god, I feel like I'd rather go for it for hours longer and saved me this amount of pain. But recovery wise, it was so much better, both in the hours that followed. Obviously I was sore and I was in the pain and blah, blah, but the days that followed, but also mentally, I just felt so much better mentally this time around. Like with TJ, I don't know, it wasn't fun. I had a very bad infection after him, so I ended up having to be admitted to the hospital again for a few days, and I was in so much pain. But then also mentally, I don't know, I remember crying a lot. And with her, I don't know if it's because you kind of already know what you're doing, even though each baby is different. But I don't know, I felt better. I felt more steady on my role as mom. I felt more confident. I felt happier in general, even though I had just been through hell and back. And overall, even like now to this day, I feel like I'm doing better this time around than I did with TJ. Maybe that's the experience. Maybe it's just because I'm older and wiser. Who knows? But this time around, I feel better. In all senses of the word. My recovery was fantastic. I recovered super fast. I don't know, maybe a week and a half of pain down there or something, but then it just stopped hurting, and yeah, it was great. 10 out of 10 would recommend the recovery this time around. People ask me, is this what would make you not want to have another baby? No, you know what, like, I remember when I was in the peak of it, on like the maximum pain I had ever felt in my life, I remember for a second thinking, I don't think I could ever have another baby because I don't want to go through this again. But the human brain is amazing, and Mother Nature is even more amazing, because now it's been almost 2 months, and yes, I remember the trauma, but I don't remember the pain anymore. So now my brain is like, no, I can do this again. I would love to have another baby. And yes, I would love to have another baby. I don't think I can convince Josh to have another baby. He's a 2 and done kind of guy. I would love 4. I would happily settle on a 3. I think it's only fair. He wants 2, I want 4. We settle on 3. I don't know if we'll ever have another baby, but basically I just want to say that even though this was traumatizing, I would happily go through it again, but maybe a little bit less traumatizing next time, if that meant I could have another baby. Let's see. But thanks so much for listening and for following along this journey and the pregnancy journey and all the comments you've been leaving. And I've been recording like a continuous vlog that I'm just gonna share little clips here and then. I've been recording it ever since she was born, of like little snippets of life. I have no idea how many videos there are gonna be, because it's just one continuous vlog, and then I'm just gonna divide the footage in a way that makes sense and just keep publishing videos. My camera ran out of battery. I was trying to finish this video. I tried recording a few clips, but I don't know what I managed to record or not. But I was explaining that I've been recording for months, and I'm gonna divide that in like little episodes, so they're not 3 hours long. But I have no idea how many videos are going to be. I feel like my channel is just going to become a series of one continuous vlog that's going to come out in episodes as I have time to edit, and whenever the episodes have a nice length to them. So that's what's coming next on this channel. Thanks so much for following along. Thanks so much for listening to my birth story, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye.